I do want to back up a few years. There was definitely lots happening in the interim between albums. But to start out with, I can't name another band, and I'm sure you get this all the time, but I can't name another band that's been so tied to music blogs for its entire career as Clap Your Hands Say Yeah. You were one of the very first.
That's what I understand. However, I understand that to be the concept or the idea surrounding this band somehow. I don't know if it's a misconception, as blogs had existed prior. Maybe, I don't know. What do you think the idea is behind that?
Well, they they definitely did exist. I mean, we're definitely celebrating 10th anniversaries for some of them at this point,
Exactly,
or
yeah.
even longer. But I guess at that point, for the first few years, they were the blogs were kind of doing their thing in their own world. But for Clap Your Hands Say Yeah, it was one of the very first ones, and it did seem to me at the time to say, oh, this is the one that they all championed, and they've all helped get out there, the name into the world.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a big help to have people who independently began these blogs start to champion the band. I don't know how much there is to say about that at this point.
We don't have to go deep. A lot of it's been said, I'm sure.
Yeah, I suppose. I think some people get carried away with the idea that we had some sort of absolute plan to turn people in our direction, and it's not necessarily the case. We kind of went through it the same way everyone else did. It just so happened that it seemed we had something that was appealing to people at that particular time.
So first record happens, second record happens, and then as far as Clap Your Hands Say Yeah goes, just quiet.
Yeah. Well, for a very good reason. We came to a point where we had been busy enough, somewhat stupidly busy, for a few years, and rather than taking a little bit of time between the two records, we jumped right into the second. Literally getting off a plane and hopping into a car, driving 9 hours to upstate New York to work on it, putting that out, and just keeping it going. Which for me, I had this romantic idea of releasing records very close together at that particular time, discounting the fact that we were on the road maybe a lot more than people might have been in the past. Somebody like Dylan, when he started off, could make a couple records a year or something like that. That was the idea for me. But it just seemed a bit too much. It's hard. It might be harder with a band to make that idea work. So the point is that we got a little bit, we got a little bit burnt out. It just felt stale when we were starting in on the third record.
Yeah.
So we had no choice but to take time off. The alternative would have been to get into a studio and make a record that we weren't absolutely behind.
Sure.
Some people need to do that from time to time. I think more people. It would be nice if more people had the luxury to do that, and we made it so. Of course, it didn't feel so luxurious at certain times, but. It just happened to be the way it just had to be that way. That's all.
Did you guys know it was just going to be a break, or was there a point where you were wondering, is this it?
I guess you can't really tell. Everybody started in on some other projects. I think in the back of our minds we all had imagined that we'd get back to it, and I hadn't. For one, I hadn't gone off and done any projects with any other people. Clap Your Hands is really my first band, more or less. I played with friends in the past, but never really, went on any tours or really made records. So it was all I knew. You got to get out there and just see sort of what you're missing, and then coming back to Clap Your Hands was in a sense like coming back home. And it felt good when we started again. You just got to see the other side before you keep going sometimes.
Yeah. That romantic image that you were talking about of albums released so close together, knowing what you know now, that the improbability of it, is that something you'd still be interested in doing, though?
I don't think it's improbable. I just think, or impossible or anything like that. I just think that, there are certain people that do it. I think Ryan Adams releases a lot of material. Will Oldham releases a lot of material all the time. Stephen Merritt. Those are a few examples. And I think the advantage lies in the fact that while they do have support of a band, it's a bit more of a delicate balance, I think, with an entire group of people to get everything straight and make it worthwhile for every particular piece involved in the project. But that said, there's a lot more of a push right now toward going on the road by virtue of the fact that, we could release 3 records in a year, sure, but for one thing, I wouldn't want to half-ass it on any particular record, and I think to a degree, you don't necessarily have enough time. I wouldn't want to rush things, basically, and that's one. And two, I don't know if it's as sustainable as it might have been in the past. I think you do have to go on tour. I think what people say is by and large correct, that bands that used to sell records need to tour a bit more often these days.
Yeah. There was a solo record in there, of course, that you did. You did your first and so far only solo record. Take away any big life lessons from that?
Yeah, I worked with some real heavyweights, and I worked in one of my favorite cities in the United States, and New Orleans, and I think I learned how the pros approach records. I had, I think, a bit more of a, an absolutely intuitive approach, or more or less intuitive. I did have some technical background, but I did learn how to construct a record in an abbreviated period of time. For one thing, we had 10 days to do that record, and for another thing, just how to interact with certain musicians who, by virtue of our age or our background, we might not be coming from the same place, but when all is said and done, we're approaching a certain form in a song, and everybody kind of gets to it and figures out how to get moving. The guys that I play with in New Orleans are just spectacular, so they can adjust to anything. But yeah, I learned a lot about how to make a record, and also how to try to lead a project. Of course, I had a lot of help with Steve Berlin producing, and from the guys who played on the record itself, because they all had a bit more experience than I did making records.
Yeah. Well, knowing all that right there, Hysterical definitely makes sense. It is seemingly more concise.
Yeah. I did take a step back and try to pinpoint what I liked about certain songs that I liked, whether it be the Beatles or the Walkmen or Dr. Dog, or and I learned. There was a long period of learning everybody's songs, and I'd listen to a record and I'd say, well, there's something to that. Part of it is ineffable. You can't really say why, and the other part is just good songwriting, and the larger part probably is just good songwriting. At least that's what attracts me, and just trying to figure out the tricks, which everybody finally has to know in one way or another. All these guys that everybody talks about, they certainly know their ways, their way around a song.
Sure. But
you know what I mean? Like all the legends, quote
right,
unquote.
right. No, I mean, there's definitely the formulas out there, but you come out across it, seemingly from a different angle too. I mean, you've got a unique style of songwriting.
Yeah, it's a bit different. I mean, I don't want to get carried away with traditional. I might call it traditional songwriting because I think at a certain point you have to try to let go of everything, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that, for example, Tom Waits does extraordinarily well. He's a great example because you know that he knows how to write. I mean, as well as anyone in the world, probably, how to write a song, just a very tight, traditional song, like perfect structure, et cetera, et cetera. But when he steps away from it, he maintains that semblance, and but he also he makes it his own in such a way that's can be a little obscure.
Yeah. Have you heard the new Tom Waits?
No, I haven't, not yet.
It's crazy.
I have the last
way.
I have, I guess, is Glitter and Doom, which is the live record.
Right. Now the new
is
single.
It good?
Well, there's only 2 singles out so far. The album's not out, but it's back to his junkyard industrial stuff, like Real Gone, So it's cool.
Yeah. And I really liked what he did with that. I mean, I know a lot of people were a little thrown off.
It's Tom.
I mean, some of my favorite records are like Alice and Blood Money of the recent records. I love those two for the production quality, but I also appreciate and enjoy Real Gone, and I can understand what he's trying to do with this new stuff.
Yeah. So when you came back and it's time to do the third record finally, and you're getting into songwriting, did you find a need, and this is back on your style of songwriting, did you find a need to say, all right, this needs to sound like Clap Your Hands, Say Yeah?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I think one thing that I kind of have a problem with some people who jump around from one project to another and suggest that this is this, and I'm going to call it this, and this is that, and I'm going to call it that, and they eventually all just sound the same. But I think that I do have to try to take into consideration everybody's proclivities in this particular project, and for that reason, I know that this is the direction I have to take this. Maybe I have to have a little bit more consideration for the fact that this is going to be there are going to be a lot of synthesizers running around in this particular song, and so I have to pull some parts out of the song, or actually simplify it to a degree, because that's supposed to carry the song rather than changes in time signature or anything like that. So yeah, I do have to sort of step back and understand that I am writing a Clap Your Hands song, and that's something that I've learned a bit more how to do over the years as well. I think the beginning I just did it. I had an idea of what this project might be, and the basic idea was relatively straight beats and and synthesizers, jagged guitars, and obviously a bit of a jagged voice. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, anybody who can, just kind of point out a direction of a songwriting style and actually work on that is amazing in my book. Hysterical, you've got a great CD. And,
thank you.
And thanks so much for sharing that with us. And thanks so much for taking the time today, too, Alec. I really
Absolutely.
do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.